annual cankers, okay? Again, we're going to just, as we see things, we're going to go, even if they're not root diseases today. But these little individual cracks that you're seeing are basically previous annual cankers that are, you know, trying to heal up. We see this regularly on red maples around here for whatever reason. The cause of it, without doing lab work, would be, you know, it'd be complete guesses, but there definitely are some fusarium that do this, especially on maples. They under stressful conditions, they get lesions under, you know, in the cambium that kills the tissue, and the tree, you know, has some good years, and it's going to try to close that stuff over. But there's quite a bit on here, and under certain conditions, you'll see a lot of that under other, you know, whenever the trees are not under stress, they may totally recover and it may go away. But I've seen a lot of trees where it seems like this is ongoing and ongoing and ongoing, and it seems like it just kind of keeps you know, coming back. So, but that's kind of indicative of an annual canker. You see what I mean? It's like little, it looks like wounds, but there's no physical reason for those wounds except for a pathogen. Okay? All right. Example of like where periodic flooding would, you know, induce Ganoderma. Okay? So I've been watching this tree. I first saw that when I first found this tree was alive. This is actually back when I first, well, one of the first years I taught dendrology with Michael. We were back here, and I was like, oh, there's Ganoderma, you know? And it was when Andrew was still working on Ganoderma. I collected the sample for him. So you see this? This, I believe, was a red maple. And it, you know, and it was actually just starting to produce a fruiting body, a Ganoderma fruiting body, but it was down at the base when I first saw it. Now you can see here, there's a big one. If you look here, it's a big Ganoderma fruiting body on this. The tree's dead now, but I mean, you can kind of see the picture here. It's right on the edge, okay, of the water. This would be a spot where, I mean, this could have been a relatively good spot for red maple. You know, it's not like it's, you know, red maples like it wet, of course. But if you had a couple of really bad flooding events, though, that left this thing underwater, you know, for long periods of time, maybe during the hurricane years where we had a couple of particularly, you know, really wet conditions that left this thing sitting under 2 feet of water for a couple weeks or something, which could have happened. That's too much. That's just too much for it. That's more than it could have handled. And maybe that just pushed it over the edge. And maybe there was some other stress thing going on, you know, because it's next to the path, and who knows. But anyway, the point is, it got infected, and the Ganoderma got established. And in this case, we have Ganoderma sessile. And actually, I think, in fact, these are two species. This is sessile, and that's applanatum. So sessile is the one that's really going to be established mostly on the roots, or, you know, the base of the tree. This little guy up here is going to infect the sapwood and cause more decay. Okay. So now, most of these Ganodermas, in contrast to Armillaria, are not really likely to move to the adjacent trees. That's one thing I forgot to say. Not likely, no. Armillaria, if you know, or you know, some of these other root pathogens that we talked about, a lot of those do have that, you know, commonality where they'll move to the trees nearby. Ganoderma doesn't tend to do that. It tends to, you know, stay on whatever tree it infected, and you don't tend to see that movement to nearby trees as much. Now the palm Ganoderma, which we may see as well, it's a little bit different because it seems to be soil-borne, or it seems to stay in this soil nearby, and so that one is still a little bit, we're uncertain about that. Okay? All right, let's keep moving this up. Laurel oaks and water oaks, we're going to find Armillaria, we're going to find you know, we're going to find all of these things. But what I wanted to find now is some Phytophthora to show you, which is always present like in these kind of wet conditions where we're near water, especially where we have some you know, periodic flooding. It's very common, especially on water oaks, laurel oaks, that kind of thing. And in Florida, we have a lot of species of Phytophthora. So Phytophthora is, I mentioned them before, but Phytophthora are not fungi. They're what are called water molds. okay? And that sounds funny to think mold, that sounds like a fungus, right? But they're in a whole kingdom of their own. They have some similarities to fungi in the sense that they produce spores, and you know, microscopically they kind of look like fungi, but genetically they're actually closer to animals. They have spores that are motile, that are actually able to move. They're in their own group. So you know, so I want to be precise when I talk about Phytophthora. And there are other water molds, there are other members of that kingdom, okay? But Phytophthora, the genus Phytophthora, is the major one with trees that we're really going to focus on, okay? But we have Pythium, and there's other genera that we could talk about when it comes to plant pathogens that are in the same group. But Phytophthora for trees is a big deal. You know, there are multiple pathogens in that group that are some of the most important diseases globally for trees. So if you've ever heard of sudden oak death in California, that's a Phytophthora. Okay, there are others. Now, a lot of people have been confused by sudden oak death, thinking that we have it in Florida, and we. Although the pathogen has been found here, it's been accidentally, I shouldn't say accidentally, it's been shipped here on nursery stock multiple times. Some of that nursery stock actually was camellias, by the way, from California on nursery stock. When it's got here, it actually, because it's called a water mold, it spreads easily in water. Any streams, soil, it can move around. So it got established in a stream in the Panhandle, and it was recovered there for about 6 years in testing. But that Phytophthora that causes sudden oak death has never actually gotten established as a disease here. It just doesn't seem happy in Florida. It's adapted to the climatic conditions that you have in coastal Northern California. If you've ever been there, you know it's nothing like here. It's cold, chilly, foggy in the summer, you know, and dry, low humidity in the summer, typically, except for the fog, which burns off, and it's just weird. It's different than the weather here altogether. It's just a complete opposite in almost every way. So that Phytophthora, it appears, is adapted to that kind of condition. And so I cautiously say, it just doesn't appear as though that Phytophthora has what it takes to really get established here. That said, we have other Phytophthora here. We have plenty of others. Phytophthora love Florida, don't get me wrong. It's just that one doesn't like it here, thankfully, it appears. So we have others, and the situation is most of them, what they do is they're living in the soil, and they have spores, what we call resting spores. They have these spores, they're called oospores, or another spore type is called a chlamydospore. It's like a thick, think of it like a seed almost. You know, it allows the pathogen to just sort of hang out for long periods of time when it doesn't have a host. Then when the conditions are right, that spore germinates and starts to grow and gets established, and it will infect the root of a host. In our case, we'll talk about oaks, because I'll show you some, I will find some Phytophthora, I promise. When it infects in this case an oak, it'll go in through the roots, it gets established, it'll start killing roots, and then it moves into the stem. And then it starts moving up through the stem, up into the lower portion of the bulb. And then it actually eventually moves out to the cambium, causing a canker. And then you start seeing like sap and bleeding start coming out. And you see sort of a black bleeding like area on the stem. And so usually that's what you see, is that like canker on the tree, okay? But the infection, believe it or not, started in the roots, and it works its way up to the stem. So that Phytophthora that does that in Florida is called Phytophthora cinnamomi. Phytophthora cinnamomi. That's a well-established, it's been here for many, many, many years. It's still thought to be not native, but it's been here a very long time. And Phytophthora cinnamomi is a killer of a lot of plants. But Phytophthora cinnamomii is also thought to be the reason that the Franklinia tree, which is native to the sort of southeastern part of Georgia, the Altamaha River, was first discovered by William Bartram, you know, when he did his explorations in the 1700s. He collected seeds of this tree and sent them back to his friend Franklin, Benjamin Franklin, and others, and they were able to get them established in their gardens. And he noted at the time that there were just a few trees of this left. He couldn't find very many. But nobody has ever found it again in the wild. It's never been found again since then. But there have been observations made that this is very, very susceptible to Phytophthora cinnamomii, you know, in cultivation. And other evidence points to the fact that Phytophthora cinnamomii was sort of ravaging other plant species in those early days in the southeast. And it's thought that maybe that's what happened to that native species, that it went extinct in the wild due to Phytophthora cinnamomii. And so, I mean, it's a hypothesis, of course. This has not been proven, but we do, but the truth is, Phytophthora cinnamomii has caused many other species to, you know, go under, and particularly in places where it's not native, like Australia. Australia is a place where Phytophthora cinnamomii has just ravaged the entire ecosystem because it's not native there. Here, it's been around for a long time, and our native species just seem to not be as, we have other Phytophthores, you know, so it's like there's some resistance in general to the Phytophthores here. They're just not all, susceptible. Some have susceptibility to it, but it's not like Australia. I'll just put it that way. Okay? So we'll look around. I also wanted to point out over here, if you look at this, I want to show you.
I don't know if that's Phytophthora here. It's really difficult to diagnose. You need lab work most of the time.
It's a nice one. Oh, I think it's nice. What species are we looking at? Oh, it looks like another maple. Yep. Is it a box elder though? Maybe. I think so. Looking at the leaves, little leaves up there coming out. I think so. It's a box elder. But that's a nice one. That's a nice canker. So that's a canker. Okay. Why do we know that's not a lightning strike? Why would you? I mean, what else could cause? I mean, what else might suggest? What else could be? Let's play diagnostician for a second. Okay. A limb could have broke. You're right. We could have had a codominant. What would be the argument against that? Are there any arguments to get anyone want to? I mean, this is fine. This is good. This is good. You're right. I mean, because it does look like there was another, you know, another stem there. I will agree with you on that. But why would we maybe say? I mean, well, let's just discuss that for a second. Any thoughts? Go ahead. Feel free. I mean, this is not a. There's no judgment.
Rotten and crumbled.
Yeah, I mean, and codominants split regularly because of that. I mean, that's one of the problems with having two competing stems is you have a weak point there, right? And so that's a good observation. And it kind of looks like that, but would it split all the way down to here? You think? I mean, all the way. And the other thing is, where is the codominant? Unless somebody took it.
Floated away.
It could have. A beaver could have eaten it, taken it away. Now, the thing is, I think there very well could have been another branch there that broke off or something. That's possible, and it may have that would make exact sense as to why something got established there, pathogen. Okay, so actually, that is, I think, part of the story. But this business of what's going on all the way down here, that's more than just it just breaking off. You know what I mean? That's due to progressive action of a pathogen going all the way down to cambium like that. You see what I mean? So we got some kind of pathogen doing that, and you can see the host is trying to close over. This is callus tissue on the edge, suggestive, defense response happening. So we have to look and see what's going on down here, but you can see even down here, the other reason we know it's not a wound, this is the real evidence right here to me. You see down here? So the bark, look, the bark down here was intact. And then you can see that it died and it started to crack, it's cracking away, okay? If that had been just a physical wound, that bark would have just been, would either been ripped off, exposing it, or, but you can see that something killed it underneath, and then the bark starts cracking and drying. So that tells you that something killed it even further underneath there. So something was moving, a pathogen was underneath that cambium killing it. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's a good example just to show you. But you can see that it probably initiated from a wound up there. That's what got it started, which is very much the commonality for these things is very often there's some kind of wound, this is why, thinnings, pruning, when you prune, how you prune, all that stuff really matters, because this is what, can result. Okay, let's keep going. Expecting to find, but this is another root disease. It's not fresh, but still, it's good. So, I didn't mention this one, but this is called Kretschmeria, which is a this is another one that gets established on hardwoods. It gets established because of usually wounds of some sort, and it will cause decay, especially of like these larger, buttress roots, this type of thing, and this is a pretty aggressive one. It'll actually cause a death to trees. This is one that we see a lot in urban areas because of like lawnmower damage to the to the roots and things like that. And so this is actually this fungus is actually an ascomycete. It's not a basidiomycete, so it's in a different group altogether. But so the fruiting bodies we're seeing now are a little bit older, a little dried up. So it'll produce new spore, new what we call stroma when the conditions are right in the summer. But anyway, this is kind of neat to see this and actually see what species it's on, right? Celtis, right? Yeah. So this does have a wide host range. We see this on oaks. We see it on Celtis, and I've seen it on elms. I've seen it on ficus in South Florida. So, all sorts of different things. But again, this is something that this would be something that we wouldn't worry about in a forest setting, but if it's in your, this is a big landscape tree in your yard, yeah, you need to worry about this because this would cause structural issues to the roots. It would cause the tree to become, it would decline, and it would cause perhaps some, potential risk in terms of the tree's, stability, because those roots like that are going to start rotting away, and of course, with time, this is by your house. You gotta worry about that tree in a windstorm. Okay, that's good. I'm glad we found that one. All right, let's keep moving. But here's an example of here's a good example of an actual like disease like that's affecting these trees, and I literally have no idea what's causing it. But look, you got some sort of little canker thing going on these elms, and it's on this one, that one, the one behind it, that one right there, this one right here. I see it right there behind behind them. I see it, I mean, here it's on this one right here. That one there, I see it, what, 8, 10, 12 trees at least right here. All have it. I can tell you that I've never seen this before.
I have so many.
So there you go. So we just found a new disease. I mean, granted, is it important? Maybe not, but, and maybe it is something already like diagnosed, but I don't know this. But it's some sort of looks like a cankerish gall type thing on the winged elm. It looks like fusiform rust, right? But it's on a winged elm, so it's not. But it's some sort of, you know, it's some kind of you know, gall, like canker type thing going on these. And then behind you, if you see that red maple, look, you see all the little cankers all over it? So that's, again, the same thing I showed you earlier on that other red maple, but just, again, on another one. I told you, I see that a lot in these, like swamp-like settings, where it seems like they just get stressed out and they end up with that. Now, if... That's not the best. Let's find some good Phytophthora. You gotta find some. Alright. If you guys come around this tree here, this is a good one. This actually, I'm pretty sure, now, this is another red maple. A big one. Look at that. But, look at how this thing's been ripped up. You see? You look at the roots, you know? And it's even starting to get, I think, a little bit of some secondary stuff starting to come in, but so red maple also gets Phytophthora. It's not, I mentioned that annual canker that it gets, but it also can get Phytophthora in it, coming in these situations. In fact, I think I might have had an example of it in my presentation. It was on red maple. One of the pictures, one of Ed Barnard's pictures from one of his old school ones from the 1980s. But anyway, so I mentioned that, you know, these often get established in the roots and come up and then start coming out. This is not the best example because we're not seeing like bleeding coming out, because I think this is old. And so I'm sure we're gonna see some on oak before we're done, and some good ones with bleeding. But anyway, but you can see, I mean, this is getting pretty ripped up. And now, granted, this tree's surviving. I mean, it's gotten to quite a size regardless of it. I mean, this is remarkable for red. You know, it's a pretty good size red maple for here. So the impact on this is arguably minimal. You know, it might have wood quality issues, but and you know, you're starting to see decay starting to get established. So this is starting to this is going to start declining at this point. You know, it's going in that direction. But anyway, I just wanted to show you kind of like mainly the symptoms of what we're seeing there and why it's causing all that cracking of bark and drying and stuff. Is, you know, that's progressive, you know, symptoms. So same thing, like, but just yeah, and it's actually, this one's bleeding a little bit, but that one's bleeding really good. There we go. It's like pulling the curtains away. Ta-da! Okay, so again, well, 2 more red maple. Man, the red maples are just showing all kinds of shit. So, but you see all the bleeding coming out all over that, and it's like, so if we were to like pull out the bark and we were to look at that cambium would just be like peppered with necrotic tissue. It wouldn't be totally necrotic, but it would be covered, because the reason it would be like a speckled nature is because the pathogen is coming out and it's killing the cambium because it moved through this vascular tissue out. It's different than a normal canker, which would be moving like in a complete uniform nature, killing it. That's why it looks like that, and it's also why, see how it looks. It almost looks like an insect attack, like insects are attacking it like this, you see? And so you have to be careful, because if you saw that just from a distance, you might, well, you could confuse the two. But if you look at it though, there's no frass, there's no boring dust, there's no boring holes. There's just bleeding coming out, you know, in these little spots everywhere. Does that make sense? again, nuanced, but you understand it. You can see the bleeding going on now. We should have brought a hatchet. We didn't, although maybe here we don't necessarily have permission to start chopping into the trees, although that never stopped me before. But we would chop into there and we'd see the black tissue. It'd be basically, it's very dark and black. You can see the difference, and so this is indicative of a Phytophthora. So, and the only way to know for sure, now of course sudden oak death, Phytophthora ramorum, does not affect red maples, but if this is on an oak, and well, I'm sure we're going to see it on oak in here, but if it's on oak, the only way to know if it's Phytophthora ramorum versus Phytophthora cinnamomi is to do lab work, because they look identical. They look truly identical on the oaks. That's why so many people have been confused in Florida, and why I still get, all the time I get people contacting me saying, oh my God, I found sudden oak death, you know? And it's like, hold up, I'm sure it's not sudden oak death. You know, it's gotta be, it's Phytophthora cinnamomi, but they look similar, and so it's easy to pick them up. Okay? The Phytophthora are actually worse, we're worried about much more than this, is one that affects pines. It's in South America. It affects pine foliage. It actually is airborne, and it infects the foliage of pines, then infects the stems of pines. It's called Phytophthora pinifolia, and we have a new project right now that we're developing, sort of it's a diagnostic, it's a surveillance system using spore traps, and part of that is to have a sort of early detection method for detecting that pathogen along with a bunch of others, so that we can put these detection systems out like near ports of entry and in major pine growing areas, so we can detect if that's around. So okay, any questions about that? Goodness, this is so nice. It's like somebody put this here for us. Look at all this. Some are. Well, the false turkey tails are over there, the white ones, and you got these. Oh my God! Wow. This is nice.
How many?
Oh my God.
Well, this is like a whole lab here. I'm telling you what. This is a whole lab. There's so many species. This one right here. Look. Yeah, this one's got. This is a. This might be a. Hang on a second. Let me see.
Trametes?
No, that's not Trametes. That's a. I think it's a. Hang on a second.
It looks pretty.
Yeah.
It's like geologic.
Yeah, like.
Oh, I just found
I'll
that.
get a picture.
Yeah,
I put it there.
I'll get a picture and
Doesn't look
identify.
natural.
But this is a good place to appreciate the beauty of these things. Because look, you got all these. You've got all these bark beetles, galleries on the bark. You've got this guy here, which is a Phalinus species, okay, or Fomes fasciatus, I should say. I'm sorry. This is Fomes fasciatus, which is a white rot fungus. This one here, I'm not 100% sure. It could be a Ganoderma, but I'm not sure which species that is. I may have to consult my former PhD student on that one. You've got Hexagonia.
Yeah. Hypnoides.
Hexagonia hydnoides. We've got so many beautiful fungi in here. This is remarkable. This is like a.
What are the basic?
Wait, find a place to come for your lunch break? Yeah, those are fires with.
Really? They
Yeah.
feel like slime. They almost feel like wet.
Yeah,
Is
so-
it just from like dew on them?
Yeah, so this is Fomes fasciatus, and this one you can actually, it's related to a closely related species, but they both have the characteristic that the context tissue is highly flammable, and so if you don't have, anything to start a fire with, you can, if you just you make a little spark, you can get that,
Burn something.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
start burning, and so it's known as the tinder fungus in the north. So looks like it's salted. Must have been a good sugar grove.